not every day, but once in a week, voices of note get up and speak. They tell stories, these voices, Listen up now, listen up to the show. For voices that move and voices that shape, this is the show. This is my mixtape. Supe here on Radio Valley 99.9 FM on the show that comes to you every Friday evening between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. My mixtape. As always, behind the controls, Tile, thank you for being here. And I'm extremely honored to introduce this guest today. You are in for a treat today because here is a person whose vocabulary, whose verbiage is, and, well, his diction is as exemplary and superlative as his wisdom. So you are definitely in for a treat today. By the way, we've had a lot of interruptions in the broadcast today on Radio Valley 99.9 FM. Very sorry, it was beyond our control. We've been having a very fickle electric supply this afternoon. In fact, since morning. But like in the Bible, the book of Genesis, on the first day, God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Right. We have extra lighting here on my mixtape as well. And those of you who are on YouTube, you will notice that as well. Of course, you guys on radio, you don't know what I'm talking about right now. But yeah, we have artificial lights now just to brighten things up a little bit. Right. In any case, my guest here today is none other than, all right, before I say that, let me just say this. Because of my tendency to talk in English more than in Dzongkha, a lot of people, they say I am a Chilip Bhutanese. It is my honor to welcome a Bhutanese Chilip to the show today. Michael Rutland, welcome to the show.
Good, thank you very much indeed. Bhutanese Chilip is a very, very good description.
Right.
And I sometimes forget which one I'm being at any given moment.
Right, obviously, because although you are originally from London, England,
that's right.
You've had a long relationship with this country, 50 years almost, 48 years to
48
be precise.
years.
Yes, right, yes. So anyway, a good point to start right now would be to ask about what is keeping you busy these days.
What's keeping me busy these days? Well, I have spent several hours in the hospital today with my grandson. I have spent half an hour in a very nice coffee shop giving him a cake to recover from the hospital. And I'm about to go and get a haircut because on Monday I'm leaving for 3 weeks in London. Okay. But in particular, during this week, I've been trying to get a lot of money to be invested in Bhutan. Okay. I've been looking after 4 investors from London,
right,
who have come here, it's their second or third visit, and I'm hoping that we've now got a significant coffee project going ahead in Sipsu. Like up to £10 million.
Wow.
And they're looking at other possibilities for investment too. So that keeps me a little bit busy.
Is that part of your formal responsibility with the British Honorary Consul?
The British Honorary Consul.
All right.
I'm acutely aware the British government doesn't give a great deal of aid to Bhutan at the moment.
Right.
So therefore, I try hard to look for other private investors who will bring money to Bhutan.
Thank you very
So
much.
we've just signed an they have just signed an MOU and an FDI agreement for this big new 1,500 acres in Sipsu of ultra high-end coffee.
Okay.
Packaging, marketing, but aiming for the really top-level markets abroad. So it probably won't go into your cup of Nescafe, I'm afraid.
Right, but that nonetheless that is so reassuring to know because we've just recently concluded the roundtable meeting and
absolutely
yes. And the offerings haven't been too promising.
Well, I think now Bhutan really is going through a life change. You know, we go through life changes.
Yes.
You know Shakespeare, The 7 Ages of Man, who puts it absolutely beautifully. Mm-hmm. So I think Bhutan is going through a life change now as we move into being, a middle developed country or something like this. And so some new thinking is required. And in the past, we have benefited from a hell of a lot of aid.
True.
Now, perhaps Bhutan is going to have to stand on its own 2 feet a little bit more. No harm.
Right,
because if you get aid too much for too long,
you become dependent.
You become spoiled.
Right, yeah. True. Which is, I think, which has been the tendency, I think, over the last many years.
It would be wrong of me to say that I notice it, but it would be wrong of me to say that I didn't notice it.
Very well put, very well put. But I certainly hold the view that, yes, we have to strive. Eventually, every country wants to be self-reliant and self-dependent.
That's
right. And while, things like international trade will obviously...
There's always been a tendency, if you come up with a good idea and present it to somebody, then the answer is, oh, what a good idea, Michael. Who can we find to fund it?
Yes.
And if I say, well, why doesn't your ministry fund it? Oh, we haven't got any budget.
Budgetary constraints. That's
I think the budgetary constraints is often an excuse for being a bit lazy.
Quite true. And yes, of course, we've always said that the private sector is the engine of growth and all of that, but that has yet to take off. I mean, it exists on paper, the policy exists on paper, but not too much has happened practically.
But if you're going to mention the private sector, one thing I think we need to push a little bit more for the private sector is rather more corporate social responsibility. I would like to see the private sector far more involved, for example, in vocational training, in technical training. And if you say to one large company why you don't do it, they say, oh, if we train somebody, they go off and work for the competitors. But the competitors, if they train, the people will go and work for the other company.
Right.
So it's an exchange, but it is increasing the skill level of the whole nation. So one needs to think beyond one's own company to what is in the national interest. And I would love to see a bit more corporate social responsibility. In fact, much to the annoyance of private business, I suggest sometimes that there should be a special training tax levied on all businesses above a certain turnover, which is hypothecated, devoted only to the provision of training programs. But I don't think suggesting an extra tax is very popular.
It certainly wouldn't be. But I can assure you that there are some companies, especially companies headed by younger CEOs, that are taking quite well to corporate social responsibility.
Good. And I hope they will lead the way and promote it on a wider basis.
Yes, I think there is a trend there, definitely, because I've been doing branding work for the last 2 years or so, and working with different companies, as well as agencies in the corporate sector and in the social sector as well. And there is a palpable change, definitely, towards thinking more about society and your impact on society. In fact, one of these companies, and I won't hesitate to mention the company itself, when I went in to bid for, to do their branding. This was Perfect TMX TMT. I said, I need to understand what is the one thing that drives your company. What is the one thing? I mean, of course, it's profit. No doubt, profit.
Obviously, yes.
But beyond profit, you must have a purpose. You must have a goal. You must have an objective. And immediately, the chairman of the company said, straight away, without any hesitation, he said, nation building.
Good.
Nation building.
Because one of the essential bricks in the foundation of the nation are or is young people. And one of my greatest concerns, because I believe it is Bhutan's biggest internal problem, is the rapid rise in youth unemployment. And especially worrying is the fact that the biggest rate of rise of unemployment is people with a university degree. So you could argue that going off and doing your bachelor's degree, you are aiming for unemployment.
It certainly seems that way, and we see all across the world, including here in Bhutan, that increasingly jobs are, it's skills more than qualification that are determining availability of jobs or your chances of getting a job.
I think a bit too much emphasis is put on the letters after somebody's name.
True.
And often the more letters you have, the more you know, but the less you can do. Knowledge sometimes acts against action. And I think we have many, many highly qualified young people, but what can they actually do?
Right. I am tempted to make this comparison between, as you said, qualification. Because, I mean, in fact, most of our senior bureaucrats have studied in, some of the best universities across the world. And yet they come back and they develop tunnel vision. So Go figure.
Yes. So action.
Yes, lad. Yes. Well, I didn't want to start the show on such a heavy discussion. Yes, I wanted to go light and get anecdotal and all of that. But well, as tends to happen with somebody of your stature.
I'm a very serious character.
I would disagree, of course. But in any case, obviously, some of my listeners, in fact, most of my listeners right now, are wondering who you are.
Absolutely.
Right.
I often wonder that myself.
Well, which is a good thing.
Yes.
But let's not get again too heavy. Last. So yes. Michael Rutland.
Yep.
Tell us about yourself. Who are you? I mean, where were you born, and how was it that you came to Bhutan?
Right. Well, to begin at the beginning, I was born on the 24th of April, 1938.
Last.
So just a couple of months ago, I had my 81st birthday.
Okay.
And then I was educated in England. I went to a boarding school. Then I went to London University and I read physics.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had wanted to become a doctor. But
I've heard you describe yourself as a physicist.
A physicist,
right.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as a physician.
Right, obviously.
You may say I read the wrong word, but the one thing teachers need to be careful of is what they say to their young pupils. Because I got admission to 2 medical schools in London, and I was so pleased. And then one day, one of my teachers said, "Oh, you don't want to be a doctor. They're 10 a penny." And I was so demoralized, I immediately cancelled my places at the medical schools, and I chose to read physics. So there we are.
Well, must have been a very influential teacher then.
Well, it was a sort of one thing that teachers don't realize. Even a simple offhand comment to a pupil can have a very big effect. So teachers need to be very careful of what they say to a pupil. But, of course, I mean, I'm perfectly happy with the choice, because if I had been a doctor, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now.
Well, who knows?
Well, it would be unlikely.
Last.
So then I read physics. I then joined the Royal Air Force. And so for 5 years, I was an officer in the Royal Air Force, working in Malta and North Africa. And I wasn't flying planes. I was involved with communications and cryptography. Codes and ciphers and that sort of thing. And then at the end of that, I did a teaching diploma, and I went to teach in a very splendid English boarding school, went to teach physics. I then moved to another boarding school in Oxford. And there I went out for dinner one evening in Oxford, and I met a wonderful lady called Deki Ladenla. And we talked about, she was an economist. We talked about everything, but the word Bhutan never came up until 3 weeks later, when she wrote me a letter asking if I was interested in teaching in the Kingdom of Bhutan for 1 or 2 years. And I immediately replied and said, no, thank you.
But how is it? I mean, I know that she was not from Bhutan. She was from Darjeeling.
She was a very old friend of Her Majesty the Royal Grandmother.
Right, okay.
And Her Majesty had asked her to look out for a teacher from England.
So that was the connection.
So, yes, I shouldn't. It was, if I hadn't gone to that dinner party in Oxford, I wouldn't be here either.
Right.
So, when you look back on life, and one of the wonderful things about being old is that you can look back on life and see how it is that you're here now in Thimphu talking to you. You can see the train of cause and effect. Now, if you're very young, you don't have much back true. On. So it is so interesting when you're old. How is it that I'm here? Whole series of odd little coincidences.
Right.
And you think to yourself, if I hadn't gone to that dinner party, I wouldn't be here. So there's no plan. In fact, one of my great mottos is that if you have too much ambition to do something, you never will. Ambition is quite a dangerous thing. And I'm very happy that I have never experienced the slightest twinge of personal ambition. And so that makes for a contented life. However,
that is so reassuring to hear for someone like myself.
Good. And some people think, but you need to do a good job. The answer is yes. You're ambitious
obviously.
for the job you're doing, but you're not ambitious for your personal advancement.
I understand absolutely
and
perfectly.
I have
what you mean.
another motto too.
Lars.
Everybody says if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Rubbish. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly.
Okay, that is new for me. Please explain.
Right. Because we are often put off trying something because we think we won't be very good at it.
Okay.
And so that, especially young people, it puts them off trying, I'll never be any good at playing tennis. I'll never be any good at archery. I'll never be any good at playing the piano. But have a go. And simply, if it's worth doing, even doing it badly, you will learn something. So my answer is, have a go. Never mind whether you're going to do it well. And all these people who say, if you're going to do it, you've got to do it well. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing. No, if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly because you will learn something from it. So it upsets people, especially parents, especially parents in England, when you say that.
Lars, I would imagine parents in Bhutan as well.
Well, I don't know. I have a feeling somehow that parents in Bhutan would understand what one meant a little more than the typical driving hockey mum parent in a Western country.
Lars, you would have to explain hockey mum. That's
I see. Argue somebody who drives their kids to be good at everything. You've seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory,
right?
Yeah?
Yes.
Well, now there was a girl there, and I forget her name, whose mother was with her, and always saying, "Eye on the prize, darling. Eye on the prize."
Right.
And you must win. Of course, she lost, but that often happens to people who are totally dedicated to winning. They end up failing.
Right.
We have one example in our former Prime Minister in England at the moment, Theresa May. Ever since she was a little schoolgirl, she wanted to be Prime Minister. She gets the job.
And then,
disaster.
Lars.
So never try too hard for one's personal advancement. You try hard. I mean, obviously, if you're doing a job, you really do it as well as you can. But you know what ambition does? It means to say, I'm doing a job now, and as soon as I start it, I'm trying to work out what my next career stage is. So half my energy goes to thinking of the future rather than trying to do this job that I'm doing now as well as I can.
Lars, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Concentrating on the present.
Lars.
The future will take care of itself.
Okay. In fact, I have my eye on the future as well. The future, as in 2 minutes from now, is when I'm going to be resuming this journey of yours from England to Bhutan. Right. But for the moment, let's in the present, let's head on to your playlist. The first song on your playlist, I don't know where did I keep that now? Right, is Moon River by Audrey Hepburn.
That's right. Now, that comes from a very famous film of the 50s called Breakfast at Tiffany's. And it was an iconic film, but nobody's heard of it today.
Right. Did she sing it? She was a great actress, no doubt.
She did sing it.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, Lars.
Often it's voiceover, but I do believe she did sing this.
Lars. Okay.
And it's a lovely song. It contains the great phrase, "my huckleberry friend," and nobody knows what that meant.
Yes, I've heard of Huckleberry Finn, but
it's not Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah, but Huckleberry Friend, yes.
And so it's one of my favourite tunes. But the background is when I was in the Royal Air Force, I was stationed on the island of Malta.
Right.
And there was a very upmarket restaurant which had a dance band and a big dance floor. And I helped them solve a problem with their amplifier. And they wanted to know how much money did I win. I said, nothing. And so the band leader said, well, I'll tell you what, every time we see you come into the restaurant, we'll stop whatever we're playing and we'll play your favourite tune. What is it? And so, top of the head, I said, Moon River. So I would walk in with girlfriend of the day, and immediately I walked in the door, they'd stop and it would break into Moon River.
That might have impressed every girlfriend you walked in there with.
It did.
All right, so that's a cue for you, Mojo Park. I do so much for Mojo Park. So, like, when I walk in, could you play me a song? Right. House band. Right, okay, so let's check it out then. Moon River by Audrey Hepburn.
Don't matter if you're high on a mountain or low in an alley, you've always got a friend in Radio Valley.
Ah, the sultry voice of Audrey Hepburn singing.
I should sing along with it, shouldn't I?
I'm
not going to.
No, but why do you say that you should sing along with it?
Because I think it's a lovely tune.
It is.
And these were the days, Supe, when songs had words. They had words that had a meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Modern pop songs.
Yes, it's like, oh my,
that's right, absolutely.
Right.
You hit the nail on the head. So I like songs with words.
Last.
And after a few glasses of whiskey, I'll sing along brilliantly.
I like songs that have words, but words that are repetitive and not too much meaning, actually. Because if you listen to the blues, for example, it's like, I asked for water, she gave me gasoline. And then the second line goes, I asked for water, she gave me gasoline.
Right.
And the third line goes, I asked for water, but she gave me gasoline.
Yeah, but you just think of Satchmo, Louis Armstrong.
Right.
That wonderful song about, what's his favourite?
Louis Armstrong?
Yeah, Louis Armstrong.
Wonderful World?
That's right, what a wonderful world. Now, you see the enormous meaning in those words.
True.
And his raspy voice.
Yes. I see trees.
Wonderful, yeah, there we are, you can do it.
To some extent, of course. Yes. Not with the depth of Louis Armstrong, of course. I'll make a good impersonator.
Right.
Last. A beautiful song, no doubt. Right. In any case, so this is... Yes. So this was in Malta, right?
That's right.
Right. And then in subsequent years, as you were saying...
After Malta, I became a physics teacher.
Right.
And then went to this dinner party in Oxford. Right. I wrote back
saying you were not interested.
Not interested. Because I had never heard of Bhutan. None of my friends had ever heard of Bhutan.
Nobody would have heard of Bhutan. Right.
People I asked, nobody had heard a clue where it was. And also Oxford is a very, very nice place to live. And I never thought a thing about it. But 2 weeks later, I had another letter from her, just saying, are you sure? And I took the trouble to find out where Bhutan was, and I was a bit surprised.
And what did you do to find out what Bhutan was? Where did you have to go?
I went to the Royal Geographical Society in London, and
so
I was invited to go along and see them at 4 o'clock. And so I took the train from Oxford to London, and when I arrived, I was very surprised because I was met by somebody and taken up to the director's office.
Okay.
Now, there's one thing that you learn through being in the Royal Air Force. If you are visiting somebody important, you know how important you are by the quality of the teacups and the quality of the biscuit. And I walked into his office, and there on the side was a tray laid with beautiful porcelain teacups and real chocolate biscuits. And I thought, I mustn't take up his time. Obviously, somebody important is coming along. And then I discovered they were for me.
Wow.
Which was very nice because, of course, the Royal Geographical Society knew almost nothing about Bhutan. And he took me to see their map of Bhutan. And I can identify to a microsecond when I decided I would come here. And that's when I looked at this map. And across most of the map was written the word unmapped.
Wow.
And I thought, it'll make a bit of a change for a year. And so that's how I came to be here.
Right. So you must have had a natural curiosity, of course.
Not really. It just sounded changed from Oxford for a year or so.
Yes, but I mean, who in their right minds would... You have a cushy job in Oxford, and then you find a map of a place that nobody's heard about, and that says unmapped. I mean, who would really...
Well, what you're saying was exactly the view of most of my friends.
Right.
They thought I was utterly mad. However, it changed my life. Absolutely, profoundly changed my life. And one of the other things, to young people making decisions about should they go to this university or that university, should they study science or arts or business, or should they do this or that? Actually, we have no way of knowing the consequences of our actions. That we have absolutely no way of foretelling the future. So, you make a decision and then you run with it. Right. And the one thing I cannot stand are people who say, oh, if only I had done this, if only I had done that. It's too late. That's the past. So you make a decision and you run with that decision.
Okay.
If you decide to be a street sweeper in Subji Bazaar, you do that job as well as you can, and you never know.
Or you do that job as badly as you can.
No. Well, no, your misinterpretation. Because you never know the consequences. I mean, you sweep Subji Bazaar really well. And unknown to you, there was an old Bhutanese lady, immensely rich, who had observed you. And then you discover when she dies, she had left all her billions of nultrums to you in her will. You can't plan for that. So what I believe is really important is to do whatever job you find yourself doing as well as you possibly can, enjoy it, put your whole heart into it, don't be worried about what the next promotion level is.
Lars.
And things will almost certainly turn out all right. So my whole life has been accident, not planned. But coming to Bhutan in 1971 was literally a life-changing experience.
And it was a deliberate decision. You probably want a drink of water? Sir?
Yes, I must have a drink of water. I'm getting too worked up.
Well, obviously we need to continue that journey.
Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine how it must have been for you to come to Bhutan for the first time. And what were your first impressions? Or what kind of conditions did you have to endure?
Well, sitting here in Thimphu today, it is difficult to paint a picture of life in 1971. And what I'd like to see is young people given a more, a deeper view of recent history.
Thus.
I don't mean the days of the Chaperon, I mean recent history. Because Bhutan has changed in the 50 years I've known it, more than 500 years in other countries. The rate of change has been absolutely phenomenal. And so to describe Bhutan in 1971, first of all, there were no telephones. I think NYAB had just started, but you could only pick it up in Thimphu.
Right.
And Dasha Benji, who you had on a program of yours, he used to run he was the Chief Justice, and he used to run a disc jockey program called Here Comes the Judge. And so there was no television, obviously.
Right.
There were no telephones. The road went from Phuntsholling to Thimphu and Paro, and then as far as Wongdi, and it stopped. In fact, I have a picture of me on the road to Punakha when they were just cutting it.
Lars, okay.
And I had a little Willis Jeep, which had the lovely number Bhutan 23, and I don't know who's got Bhutan 23 now.
Lars.
And it was a delight to drive from Thimphu to Paro because there was nobody else on the road. And to go down to Phuntsholling, if you passed 4 or 5 vehicles, that was a surprise.
Lars, wow.
And you knew who were in the vehicles by the registration numbers. Most of the vehicles were Bhutan something or another.
Yes.
So I say that in those days and until recently, Bhutan was a communications black hole. And this is one of the very biggest changes that has been. When you visited Bhutan in the 70s and even 80s, the only knowledge you had was what you carried with you in your own head. There were no libraries, there were no books, there was no internet.
True.
So if you forgot what 2 times 2 equals 4, you couldn't find it out. Today, all the knowledge of the world is in this
the touch of a
little
finger.
device,
Right. Yes.
a mobile phone. All the knowledge of the world you can find out the answer to any question you have. And what do young people do? They use it for social media and Twittering and things like this. I do wish all of us, not just young people, realised what power we have in our mobile phone today. And mobile phone coverage in Bhutan is better than in England. Where I lived in England, in a very upmarket town called Guildford, the only place where I could get mobile phone coverage reliability was sitting on my toilet.
Seriously?
And the number of people, I mean, it's a jolly good job they were not video phones. The number of people of great eminence, including in Bhutan, who I have held a long conversation with while sitting on my toilet, is uncountable. But the mobile coverage in Bhutan now is absolutely remarkable. So everybody has the knowledge of the world at their fingertips. There is virtually no question you can ask that you cannot find the answer to. And that, to me, is one of the greatest changes in Bhutan. Instead of a communications black hole, we're now in contact with the world, which is quite remarkable. Food. I have to confess, when I first came here, I mean, I nearly died.
I would imagine, yes.
Yeah, food was difficult, and I don't know if you've heard of late Dasho Nishioka.
Yes, of course.
Well, one day, he was living in Paro, and one day I was complaining about food, and I was dying of malnutrition, and he said, well, vegetables. Grow your own vegetables. And I said, come on, you must be joking. I haven't a clue how you grow a vegetable. I'm from a city. He said, well, no, you don't do it yourself. Just ask the people who look after your house. Ask them to make a vegetable garden. Well, that isn't the way you operated in Oxford. So I tried it as an experiment. A few days later, there was a vegetable garden.
There you go.
And the same chickens. I was desperate for an egg. And we went to visit a local farmer. And I had a couple of people accompanying me, and the farmer and his wife all came out, and great fuss. And I asked, could I buy a chicken? And there was a in the backyard, and there was a chicken. And in those days, there were no nultrums.
Okay, Lass.
Nultrums had not yet been invented.
Lass.
And so what I was paid by Her Majesty the Queen in were little silver coins called tikchungs, which were worth half a rupee. And I would get bags of tikchungs every month. So I had a handful of tikchungs, and I asked the chappie who looked after my house to pay the farmer. Of course, the farmer wouldn't take any money. And I thought, well, I can't keep begging food like this. So Nishioka said, ask your servants to get some chickens. 2 days later, I had chickens and eggs and things like this. And Dasha Benji, one day, he had been in Kalimpong, and he sent me up a delicious packet of bacon. And now, bacon is one of the things that English people miss. It's like chilies, you know. Without chilies, I will die.
And you're right.
And so I gave this to the cook to grill. The next thing I knew, there was smoke coming out of the little kitchen, and this invaluable bacon was burnt black, and I burst into tears.
Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, it was very... Being there in Saskatchewan in 1971 was very isolated. It was quite hard coming from living in a city to working out how you existed in the Bhutanese context of those days. But it was a very formative experience. And I've never forgotten, when I left, a fellow teacher there was Lupan Pemala.
Yes.
And I went to say goodbye to Lupan Pemala, and he was leaving as well.
Okay.
I had spent 2 weeks packing 4 tea chests with all my belongings to be sent via Calcutta back to England. He was leaving the next morning. I said, Lupan, have you packed? And he said, yes. And he pointed to a little cloth-wrapped bundle in the corner of the room. And he said that. I said, is that all? He said, yes, we don't need any more. I went back to my house and I looked at my 4 tea chests. And I thought, I'm going wrong somewhere. Anyway, of those 4 tea chests, only 1 arrived in England. God knows where the other 3 are.
But you did send all of them.
Yes, but only 1 arrived. How unfortunate. And I have never forgotten that lesson from Lupan Pemala. Too many worldly possessions are a burden. And it's something that has stayed with me
Lus.
all my life.
Lus.
So I was very sorry Lip and Pamela passed away recently. So it was a formative experience.
Lus.
And, of course, I repeat, it has changed my life in every way imaginable. It has affected every other job I've done since then. And, of course, it means that now I retired 21 years ago, and I came on holiday every year to Bhutan. And so I came on holiday, and I think I'm still on holiday.
That's a long
a 21-year holiday is quite good. Yes,
Last. Yes, obviously intriguing. I know that a number of people who have, like you, just come here for a short stint working in Bhutan as professionals, go away affected in mysterious. No, I don't want to use that word. In very deep ways. Develop a connection.
When I left, I had no intention of returning.
Lus.
And every time I came here, I would always say, well, that's my last visit to Bhutan. I have never tried to come back.
Lus.
It has always just happened. And I believe the word mysterious is appropriate.
Okay.
Because it is uncanny the way in which throughout all the last 40-odd years, somehow or another, I've come back to Bhutan. I sometimes say, this isn't a very complimentary analogy, I sometimes say Bhutan is like a very beautiful spider, which weaves an invisible web around you, and every so often somebody just tugs the web and here you are again. It is not explainable. In my case, it isn't because of an ambition always to come back here. I've met many people with an ambition to come and live in Bhutan, which never happens. In my case, it has always happened by happy chance. And people sometimes say to me, oh my goodness, you must love Bhutan. No, that isn't the verb I use at all. I feel very comfortable in Bhutan. I've had the great privilege of knowing people over 48 years. So I know a lot of very senior people when they were very young. I mean, I won't mention names, but a certain former prime minister, I remember him coming to see me in Sesame Chawton, and when I opened the front door, he bowed very deeply. And then in later years, I would do the deep bowing. So it's been very interesting to see people starting as teenagers and ending up as prime ministers.
Right.
And of course, obviously, deeply honoured to know the royal family all those years as well. So it's a very funny thing. I compare it to wearing your favourite old pullover. I don't know whether this analogy works in Bhutan. Perhaps I should say my favourite old go. Which you've had years and years and years. High quality, but, a bit worn here and there. But it's so comfortable.
Yes, it fits perfectly.
You just feel happy in it.
That is a nice analogy, I would think.
Yeah.
And
it's nothing to do with gross national happiness.
No, but I would think it's because you have seen Bhutan itself as a child and seen it grow and morph.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And yes, and I'm very fortunate that I have an adopted Bhutanese son. Who His Majesty and Chief Justice made my legally adopted son, 29 years ago. So I have 5 grandchildren, and watching them all grow up is lovely. I mean, the eldest one, from a tiny baby, she is now aircrew in the business class of Qatar Airways and this sort of thing. So, in fact, one of my tunes or songs to play later are my 2 grandsons singing together in yellow pencils, but that will come in a minute.
Yes, I uncovered this article in the Telegraph, I think it was, from 2004, where you were quoted as saying, when you talk about your family, you said, "Here I am, a miserable, crusty bachelor."
Right.
I like your choice of adjective there, crusty bachelor, all my life.
Say grumpy.
Certainly not grumpy. And now in a lovely, vibrant, young family.
That's right. Yes. Tremendous privilege.
But when you came here in 1971, you also found yourself in the company of a vibrant young prince who you had to tutor.
Yes.
I would, like all my listeners out there, we would beg you for an anecdote or two about those times.
I never... If I had received one nultrum for every occasion in which I have been asked about teaching His Majesty the Fourth King, then I would be a billionaire now. And I'm not, because I believe it a very important part of a word called integrity. That when you're in a position of trust like that,
right,
it is very wrong to break that trust.
I understand completely.
I mean, I hope he doesn't mind if I recount how His Majesty was given a motorbike. I believe it was the first motorbike in Bhutan.
Could I press you to relate that anecdote just after we get into your playlist once again?
What's the next one?
The next one is what is it? Kezangla. How appropriate! How appropriate!
Well, I mean, I first heard that song. It had only just been written in 1971. I first heard that song sung at a dinner given by Her Majesty, then Her Majesty the Queen, in Paro Palace. And I thought it was rather nice because she was actually Kezang and this song was Kezangla.
Yes.
And I didn't understand the words at all.
Right.
I think, I may be wrong, I think it was written in her honour. And it was a lovely tune and it was my very first Bhutanese song.
Nice. And this was back in 1971.
71.
So this is a legitimate classic. Let's take a listen to Kezangla.
Don't matter if you're high on a mountain or low in an alley, you've always got a friend in Radio Valley.
Right, so as I said, a legitimate classic Kezangla, but of course that was a modern Rigsar rendition of the original Pedra Kezangla.
Well, there we are. You see, in 1971, Supe, there was no Rigsar. And what I remember is the old, traditional, very gentle, very lovely style. But in a way, the Rigsar version is a sort of manifestation of how Bhutan has changed and how young people have changed today. And so I'm quite happy to listen to the newer version.
Obviously, that must have been a time of vinyl.
That's right, yes. The sort of records that you could break.
Right. Well, of course, we were talking about motorcycles a while ago, right?
Yes. Oh, yes, His Majesty, he had a motorcycle. And I was trying to work out how to teach about the equations of motion. S equals UT plus R.
I'm going to get a little lost over here if you're going to talk physics.
I won't go into detail.
But please.
We used to have him ride his motorcycle down the road by Sesam Chotan. And then all the students would stand by the road in order to time him. But it didn't actually quite work because they were supposed to wave a little white cloth as he went by. But especially with the one or two of the servants we had doing this, all the timing went wrong because as he went by, they did a deep bow and then waved with a handkerchief. So I abandoned that experiment. There was one other. If you fire an arrow straight up into the air and time the time for it to reach the ground again, with a simple little formula, S equals a half GT squared, you can calculate how high the arrow went. And so I thought, well, this is very good. And so I persuaded His Royal Highness to fire an arrow straight up into the air. And as the arrow turned, I thought, oh dear. And fortunately, there was a tiny little bit of wind which blew the arrow so that it hit the ground a few feet away from him. But just as well it did, otherwise the history of Bhutan would have been very different.
Wow.
But no, it was enormous fun teaching them all. And
but an enormous responsibility as well, I would imagine, right?
Well, it never seemed that to me. I mean, I love teaching.
Lars.
And
which is apparent.
They were very receptive students.
Lars.
And so it was just like teaching in England, except I didn't have quite so good a supper or a lunch. But apart from that, young people are young people the world over. They misbehave in exactly the same ways. They have exactly the same outlooks. So that aspect of it, the job aspect of it, was not so different. The living aspect and getting to understand Bhutan, that was so interesting. And of course, it was at a slightly difficult time in Bhutan. So it took a lot of learning.
I would imagine so. As you mentioned earlier, whatever knowledge you had, that was knowledge you came with, and there was very little room for you to expand on it. External knowledge at least, right? And here we are right now in real time. Right now, I know there are people in New York City listening to us live at this very moment.
Well, I hope Thimphu never ends up like New York City.
Oh, certainly not.
It's going that way slowly.
I think so as well. I took a walk this morning through Jujina, and the way it has transformed. I haven't been up there in years.
A place which really amazed me is a little bit of Thimphu called Bibina, near the Indian Embassy. And it used to be all forest.
Yes.
And the other week, I just drove up a little bit. I was amazed
at the number of houses and the size of the houses. That's what struck me this morning as well.
I'm often asked by visitors, what changes have you noticed in 49
years? Which is one of the questions I was going to ask you anyway, but
yes,
let us.
The question in. And my answer is, do not be misled by what you see. If we look at Babessa, if we look at the middle of Thimphu, if we look at the new BNB building, the new BOB building.
Right.
My goodness, what a lot of change. My view is this. What you see with the eye is not real change.
Okay.
Because it can so easily disappear. It can so easily be demolished.
Right.
Buildings are not real change. What to me is real change is what goes on in the heart and what goes on in the head. And both of those are invisible. And if we take a family who've just come from a village up the mountain in East Bhutan or Central Bhutan and are now lodged in a modern apartment in Bhutan, Thimphu, have they really changed just like that because they're living in a new apartment? No. So one of the challenges to me for the people who govern Bhutan is to understand not the physical changes, the new roads, the new buildings, electricity, television, mobile phones, not to understand that, but to understand how the people have changed in their heart and in their head. And that is much more difficult to find out.
I would agree. I would certainly agree. But yes, the tendency for us, for most of us, is to look at what is immediately perceptible and form our impressions, you know.
Yes, but that's the easy thing to do.
Yes.
The difficult thing is looking at how the people have changed inside themselves. Have they changed? How much have they changed? And one of the great challenges today is marrying together old attitudes with modern circumstances. The two often don't fit easily side by side. And how do you create harmony between what was, what is,
and
what will be?
Last.
And I think that is a very, very big challenge for Bhutan. And it's all happened very quickly.
Very quickly, yes. Because the thing is, you know, if we take, for example, let's say television, you know, all across the world, it was there was development of the technology along with a cultural change.
Yes.
Whereas for us, it was 1999. Boom.
Sudden.
Bam. Yeah, all of a sudden,
47 cable stations.
There you go.
Including WWF which didn't stand for World Wildlife Fund.
Yes, it did.
But for World Wrestling Federation.
Yes.
And I'm told
and it doesn't even real wrestling.
Yeah, and kids, indeed. And children in the school playground were reenacting WWF and nearly killing their friends.
True.
So that was banned, I think, wasn't it? So what I believe is so important is that our rulers need to find a way of creating harmony in a situation where there are so many differences that disharmony can so easily arise. And to me, harmony is a much more powerful word than happy.
Mm-hmm.
And though gross national happiness, of course, is Bhutan's basic principle, I like to think of it more as gross national harmony. And the difference to me is this. If I go down to the cremation ground, there is not much happiness there, but there is an enormous amount of harmony.
Beautifully
Friends, relations, workmates, family, monks, and even the dogs waiting for a snack. The harmony at the cremation ground is wonderful to see, but nobody can say there's a lot of happiness. So to me, also to me, happy can be very selfish. I can be happy at your expense. Harmony requires a relationship between a number of people, not only between a number of people, but between people and nature, between people and animals, between material life and religion. So harmony is much less selfish a concept than happiness. And so I like the idea of harmony.
Now that you put it that way, I like it too. I really do. And I think it runs deeper than happiness, which can be ephemeral, you know.
Yes. And if we look at gross national happiness and the intention of His Majesty the Fourth King, I would like to think that His Majesty was actually thinking of happiness and harmony.
Yes, I would
rather
agree.
than just one.
Yes.
And but GNH, we've got it now.
Right.
So I promote GNH Mark II.
Right. Last. Well, I guess. Well, it was quite by accident that the entire term came up. Gross national happiness. It was at a media interview with the London Financial Times, I think it was. Right. And we, of course, then the system, let's say, was all too eager to jump on and grab that.
Yes, particularly at the time of the financial crash, 10 or 12 years ago.
Yes,
it hit a raw nerve.
True.
And it has done a great deal for Bhutan's reputation.
But for all intents and purposes, I think that's what His Majesty meant, you know. Happiness and harmony. Right.
Yes.
Last. Speaking of which, how would you view, say, party politics? Is there a place for harmony with party politics?
Well, I hope very much indeed that Bhutan is able, as time goes on, to produce a harmonious model of party politics, because one of the great dangers of political parties is that they depend on disharmony.
Precisely.
Because unless your party is different from mine, and unless my party argues against your party, there's no point in having them. So I think the great danger, and we see it in the United Kingdom at the moment, for example,
all across the world, in fact.
Indeed. America, Democrats and Republicans. So I think the great danger of political parties is that they create divisions where there were no divisions before.
Right.
And I hope very much indeed that in Bhutan we shall be able to see the emergence of political parties in a way which does not create divisions. I think one must be a little concerned to look at social media during the last election, for example. And how
disturbing it was.
Yes, divisiveness is creating, and at every level, all the way from a district through to an individual family.
True.
So I do hope that Bhutan will be able to develop its democracy in a way which creates harmony and not disharmony.
I have to agree with you, and I'm doing that not just because you're my guest and I'm trying to be nice to you, but I really do agree in this case, simply because I lost my chain of thought now.
Well, disharmony and party politics and social media.
Right.
One of the really interesting things, Chilip did a bit of research into social media during the National Council and the National Assembly elections. During the National Council elections, social media was relatively benign.
Okay.
It was not so divisive.
Yes, yes.
In the National Assembly elections,
yes, it was.
Because of political parties, social media was very nasty.
Right. The point I wanted to make was, if we had, like in most other places, visible or perceptible ideological differences between parties, it might make sense then again, but right here in Bhutan, right now, what we see is almost every party is guided by the principles of gross national happiness.
The danger then is that the elections become based on personalities.
Right.
And that is not very desirable. I mean, I think we saw that actually in the first election, which was very much based on personalities.
True.
So I hope very much that Bhutan is going to be in a position to see a way through this minefield of danger and evolve a system which creates harmony and not disharmony.
I can say of one area where we seem to have done well with change and development and exposure is the area of music. So we head on back to your playlist, right? And this is all right. This is the Sunset for Somebody Else. It's a cover by the Yellow Pencils, who are a group that perform regularly at Moja Park, and a group that is close to your heart.
Well, it's very close to my heart because Jamyang Rinchen and Ugyen Michael Wongchuk are my two grandsons. And in this particular cover, they perform together with the Yellow Pencil bands in lovely harmony, I might add.
Right.
And so I think they do it rather well. And it's available on YouTube.
Yes.
And so I would love to hear you play... What is it called? Sunset for Somebody Else by the Yellow Pencils. How about that for an advertisement?
Excellent.
I know I've seen your face somewhere. Selling something.
All right, for those of you who tuned in late on radio, you are listening to my mixtape here on Radio Valley 99.9 FM. And I realize right now I just said 99, not my usual 99, because I am very conscious of the fact that I have somebody with impeccable diction here in the studio as my guest. My guest, of course, for those of you tuned in late, is Michael Rutland. Lasla. So we were talking a while ago about gross national happiness.
Yes.
I know at a talk which is called The Search for Harmony in the 21st Century, and of course we're talking about harmony as well, so all of this fits in well. You made this analogy of G&H, and you said you have made this analogy of this artist who was doing a painting and then the canvas. Could you elaborate?
Yes, I think one of the difficulties is finding a link between gross national happiness, which is in effect something produced by government policy, and an individual person's contentment and happiness, shall we say. And I first had this problem when I gave a talk in Salzburg in Vienna. And I was trying to think about how do we connect these two together. The government cannot legislate to make you happy. It can perhaps make you unhappy, but it can't make you happy. So to me, it seems like this. I go to the Institute of Zorig Chusum, and I see a young chap painting a beautiful tanka on a canvas. Well, now, to me, gross national happiness, the set of government policies, the 4 pillars, etc., to me, that is the canvas on which you are going to paint a picture. And if that canvas, if the warp and weft are strong, well-sized, beautifully made, then it's easier for you to paint a beautiful picture on that canvas. Thus, if government policy fulfills all the GNH criteria in the 4 pillars, for example, then it is easier for an individual to paint their own personal picture of happiness on that canvas. But it doesn't guarantee you're going to paint a beautiful picture. There will be times, we all have times of sadness.
Yes.
When the picture of happiness you paint is not very good. But it makes it easier to paint a picture of happiness. Equally, if the canvas is bad, if the whole regime and government policies are bad, then you can still paint a happy picture. But it's much more difficult. Now, one of the things, if one thinks about that one realizes is that the real causes of happiness and unhappiness are 90% of the time not material. Okay, you lose your mobile phone. For a few days you're not very happy, but you'll get another one. You lose your wife, your son, your daughter, your friend. You'll be unhappy for a long time. So to me, the real causes of personal happiness relate to relationships rather than material things. But as I say, GNH, grand government policy, gross national happiness, that is the weaving of the canvas. And your happiness, it's up to you to paint it. And you try as well as you can to paint a beautiful picture. You won't always, you will sometimes. But it's up to you making your own happiness. The government cannot order you to be happy.
So GNH in that sense is it's let's say it has to create, the government must create the environs or the conditions.
Let's just take law, for example. If the law is equal, fair, accessible to everybody, and you have a problem with your neighbour, it is going to be easier to solve that problem with a fair, equal justice system. And you'll feel happy, and with luck, your neighbour might feel happy too. But if the law is patently unfair, then it'll be jolly difficult to feel happy. So that's just one example. And it works at the economic level too. If some people are manifestly exorbitantly rich and lots of people are exorbitantly poor, that is not going to create harmony.
Okay. So which brings me neatly to this question. In 2006, you were conferred Bhutanese citizenship.
Yes. Deeply honoured.
So how's your painting going now?
Very well. First of all, I was deeply honoured. His Majesty the Fourth King, knowing my strong family connections, was so kind and deeply appreciated. And one thing if I could just say something about the Fourth King.
Please,
from my own personal experience, first of all, he has a great sense of humour. It's not always apparent to all citizens. Because you're not really supposed to look into his eyes. But sometimes he will say something and there's a great twinkle in the eyes there. Secondly, he is most enormously thoughtful of people. And I believe there are many people who have experienced this. I certainly, personally, have experienced his wonderful thoughtfulness about people. So, from him being my pupil, I now hold him in enormous affection and respect. But yes, I believe I'm very lucky to be here. It is a very nice place to be retired. I'm kept active enough to keep active, rather than sitting in an old folks' home in England looking at the television 14 hours a day. I meet lots of people. I have the family, which ranges from 3 up to 24. So I've got a good spectrum there. So I appreciate the role of being Meme, but not Meme Hele Hele. I think I'm a bit more intelligent than Meme Hele Hele. So yes, I feel very content here. And as a manifestation of that, I have sold my house in England because when you get to my age, the day may come quite suddenly when you can't do the long haul journey. And you have to decide, where do you want to be, there or here? And I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be here.
Which, in any case, it is rare, even here in Bhutan, to find an 81-year-old, talk as lively as you do. Yes, and with
everybody tells me I talk far too much.
Well, I would have to disagree, because I mean, if you were just blabbering and it was just casual banter, then probably yes. But I always find, whenever I have the occasion to be in your company, Mr. Michael Rutland, that you are this reservoir, this seething cauldron of wisdom and wit, and it's always so entertaining, right, and enlightening to be in your company.
Yes. I would never associate wisdom or wit with me, but there we are.
And humility as well, might I mention.
No, I'm not terribly humble.
Well, that's not quite apparent. What does come out is this incredibly informed personality who has this obvious wit, but is yet so humble. That is what comes out right now.
Big part, and which I am grateful for, is acceptance. You accept today. I've just done one of my Royal Tutorial videos on past, present and future.
Okay.
And the actual motto comes from one of the young chaps who works for us. He's got it pinned above his desk.
Okay.
And it says, respect the past, appreciate the present, and plan for the future.
Okay.
Now, I believe respecting the past is so important, because it is what has made us. The past is what the result is what we are now.
Yes.
And appreciating the present. So often people don't appreciate the present. They're always wanting more, always wanting something in the future. But if you actually appreciate what you've got now at this moment, it makes life fairly content.
Lars. I'm just hoping that if at all I have the privilege of living as long as you have.
I'm sure you will.
I hope so. Well, it's you never can tell. Yes, yeah. But if I do, that I will have this spirit that you carry, this infectious spirit of happiness and wit and humor and wisdom and all of that.
I mean, when I watch the Royal Tutorial programs with me in, I can only watch for 2 minutes, because I bore the pants off me.
You bore the pants off you. Well, you've been with you for 81 years, so I suppose that's natural for you.
Yes.
But for us, certainly not.
No surprises.
Right. No. And like you said, again, you had to make a choice between, deciding to paint in England or to paint in Bhutan.
That's right.
And for many of us, I think, over here.
I should hasten to add, the reason for my decision was nothing to do with the beautiful mountains. Nothing to do with the zongs or the temples, but all to do with relationships.
Lars.
The family around is fun, and I know lots of people. So the decision was based on people and not scenery.
Lars. So you've decided that your last years are going to go your way.
Absolutely.
Right.
How did you guess?
Frank Sinatra, My Way, which is the final song on your playlist, when we're going to close the show out with that song.
Thank you.
Tell us about this song.
Well, I think the song is very great. Frank Sinatra, as you know, Frank Sinatra had a very funny reputation. He was said to be involved with gangsters and with, in the days of drug dealing and all this sort of thing. So he had a very checkered reputation. But, of course, a person of immense achievement and immense success. So and one of his very final songs was, I Did It My Way. So never mind about what everybody else thinks. I did it my way, and he was successful. And I've done it my way, and I'm very happy living in Bhutan.
And we are glad you did it your way, because you've had an indelible effect, I think, on, and this is not an understatement. As much as you would refute this is not an understatement. You've had an indelible effect on the history of this country. I wouldn't hesitate to say that.
In that the arrow, when it descended, landed a few feet away.
That was the wind. That was the wind.
That was the wind. Yeah.
But Michael Rutland, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
And for giving us the feeling that, yes, we are indeed privileged to be living in this beautiful country.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah. Right. This show, as always, is broadcast on a Saturday and a Sunday, which is tomorrow and the day after. In case you missed part of it and you want to listen to it in its entirety, catch the rebroadcast. If you can't get the rebroadcast, then you can always log on to the onto the Radio Valley Facebook page, where we will have the SoundCloud link, and of course, all of you over there in YouTube land, you can watch us on YouTube. Meanwhile, I want some sponsors for this show. All right, so we leave you with Frank Sinatra's "My Way."
Don't matter if you're high on a mountain or low in an alley, you've always got a